We're just trying to reimagine what things would be like if we were living in the healthiest place on earth.
The food that we're eating right now from Whole Foods or wherever, even if it says organic, it doesn't have the right minerals or vitamins or even digestive enzymes that come from nature itself to help you process that food. Hence why so many people have toxins in their bodies or have digestive issues, and that's why people leave the country and then feel better.
There's a book written by a guy named Ian McCarg. It was called Design with Nature. And it was really the birth of all the ideas that I utilize to this day. It's this concept that if your approach to design begins with honoring what's there before you get there, through using science, study, and persistence, you do the right things, you can integrate development into an ecosystem without completely disrupting and destroying the ecosystem. So many people aren't on the same journey maybe that you and I are from a health and wellness perspective. They're just overwhelmed, they're confused, they're frustrated. People are experiencing changed lives out here.
Those are one of my moments. I was like, this is what life should feel like every day.
The farm's purpose is to help you do those 4 things. Number 1,
my husband and I came to the farm, I would say 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago for the first time. Jeff, you know, Jeff Myers, the person that we know. And we brought our dogs, and I just remember, and it wasn't as developed as it is right now.
Oh yeah, we were just getting started at that point.
But it was really, really good. And he kept inviting us. You know, it was very, insisting. And I was like, we got to go. Like, let's go, right?
Yeah.
So we drove 6 hours away from Miami, and we drove down with our dogs, and we stayed about 2 or 3 days. And I just remember not wanting to leave.
I love it.
This is very different than Miami. Okay, this is a very different life out here, but I remember sitting outside at one of the cabins and we had a fire going and it was dead middle of the winter.
Yeah.
I'm talking, we had bundles and bundles of clothes on, just sitting outside. Dogs would like go outside, but then come back in. Like that's how cold it was. But I just remember looking at the sky and like I could see all the stars at night.
Oh yeah.
Right? Because there's no lights and like,
we have one of the darkest skies in the nation here.
I mean, I've seen it now.
Yeah.
I believe that. So
well, remember, we're on, let me get oriented here. Right there is the Okefenokee Refuge, 2 miles from here. 500,000 acres of pristine uplands and wetlands. And so we're surrounded by nothing but
nature.
Yeah.
And this is on 1,000 acres.
Yes.
Right? So I just remember looking up and I just remember thinking like, wow, like this is what life should feel like every day. This much peace, right? This much, it was connection. I was feeling connection. And I'm not a stranger to that myself.
Right.
And neither is my husband. So when we were sitting there, we're like, oh, wow, like we get so caught up in our world and like, work, trying to make it happen. And I was like, okay, those are one of my moments. I was like, I want to live on the farm someday.
Yeah.
Like, this is fun. Miami's great, but there will come a time in my life where maybe if I want to step away for a couple months at a time, then we have to be able to do this. And like, I'm in my early 30s at this time. So I'm like having like one of those moments of like, maybe I don't want the city life forever.
Right.
Yeah. Or maybe I don't want it all year round.
Right.
I want a place where I can escape.
Yeah.
Then another turning moment for me in that same trip was when Jeff had said, you guys can go pick your, food to cook later. Okay. My parents are immigrants from India, so I am not a stranger to tasting produce and food from other countries and grew up going to India. I know that it tastes different than what I was raised on in America. Why is it different? If it's good or bad? Didn't get that far, but my mom was always listen, this is not healthy, but this is healthy.
Right.
Like, they're growing their stuff. It's so big. It's not supposed to be that big. I knew of it. I just didn't appreciate it as much. I remember being here. We were picking our, I remember some of the vegetables, Brian didn't even know what they were. My husband didn't even know, but I did, right? Because of my mom. And so I'm picking the stuff. We go back and I'm cooking and I took one bite and I was like, this tastes like the stuff that my grandmother used to make or that I've had in India. And I was like, and I just remember calling my mom. I was FaceTiming her. I was like, Mom, you have no idea. Like, this tastes like exactly the same. She's like, their soil must be different. She's like, that is a true farm then. Yeah. And everything I was explaining to her, she was just blown away. And I mean, we told everybody about this place, So I just remember thinking like, what a beautiful thing Jeff is doing.
Yeah.
How incredible. And like the vision that you guys had and you were speaking of at the time, and he'd been doing this for 20 years and like this came to him years and years before, and then to see it happen and then now to be here today, I was like, wow, it's come a long way.
For sure.
And you both did it.
Yeah.
You both did it. And so I don't know, I felt a really big need to I think more people should know about the farm. And I wish this could be, and we'll get there obviously, but I wish this could be something that is easily found more in our country.
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I think it's a beautiful story. I love to hear about the vegetables too, because I love to geek out on all this stuff and can talk for hours about the challenges and the solutions and everything else. But one of the things I try to do when people visit here is I try to keep it simple for them, because so many people aren't on the same journey maybe that you and I are from a health and wellness perspective. They're just overwhelmed, they're confused, they're frustrated. So one of the things that I try to share with them here is our 4 pillars that we really want to get across to people is, number 1, the nutritional piece of it. We've talked a lot about it, but I even make it less complicated. I say, number 1, eat from the land, eat real whole foods. Just start there. Just eat as many of your calories as you can, a diversity of foods, different colors, everything else for your micro, gut biome.
That's important. Everyone's very used to eating the same things, the same meals.
Eat a diversity of stuff. Eat real food. Yes. Don't focus too much on whether it's called Mediterranean or whatever. Just eat real food. Stop eating the processed stuff. Step 1, nutrition. Step number 2. And by the way, there can be a lot more steps, but I don't try to overwhelm people. Mm-hmm. Step number 2, move your body. I don't use the word exercise because people get intimidated when you use the word exercise. I tell people, in this whole place is designed to get out of your cabin and to move your body. And I tell people, go out and forage for your breakfast. Go grab your eggs over here. Don't worry about exercise. Just move your body. Just go get the eggs and come back, make the fresh eggs. Go out for lunch. Be inspired by all the lettuces over in the standing garden, the tomatoes, the squash. Come back and make lunch, and then move your body. And so this whole idea of just getting out of your seat and moving your body is the second thing we teach. Again, trying to keep this very simple. The third one is we teach, be engaged, be curious. Learn. Don't get off scrolling. Learn something real. Read a book. Listen to something you don't know about, but engage your mind and challenge yourself. And then number 4, be fulfilled through relationships with other people in your community. Get engaged. Be in a relationship. Don't be focused inward on yourself. Be grateful in being a relationship. And so, we could go on and there's lots of other great things to do, but I tell people if you can focus on those 4 things as a starting point, we have set the farm up. The farm's purpose is to help you do those 4 things.
I could talk to you for hours about those 4 things.
Yeah.
Literally, this could be 5 episodes.
Absolutely.
But I love that.
So but people are experiencing changed lives out here. So they're coming out here and, the great news is if you're doing those 4 things, guess what? There's byproducts of those 4 things. When you get outside, you're now out in the sunshine. And you're exposing your skin to the sunshine and the vitamin D and all the receptors inside of us. Your eyes, your circadian biology is getting right now because you're going out when the sun's rising and when it's setting. All of these things are accidental to just being here on the farm.
Can you go into the soil and the regenerative farming portion?
Sure.
As much detail as you'd like to go into, because I feel like that's something that not a lot of people know about.
What I like to share with people is that regenerative farming to me is really nothing more than mimicking what nature does. And what nature does, and it was the way that the Great Plains were made so fertile, is the buffalo move through and they trample the ground and move the soil around. They poop and the organics get all, moved around. They eat the grasses. The grasses, whenever they feel the strain of being eaten, they're living things. And when they sense that the pressure that they're feeling, and so their roots grow deeper in the ground. And when their roots grow deeper in the ground, it breaks the soil up more to make it more porous. And when it makes it more porous, it's exuding carbon from the atmosphere. It's sequestering the groundwater and making a superficial aquifer so that life can grow. And so you've got this beautiful picture that's happening by animals moving through in cycles. And so imagine, you've got animals moving through, you've got grasses growing, you've got grasses being eaten, and you've got the soil being enriched because of that. Well, all we're doing is mimicking what nature already does. And so we use cover crops to mimic the grasses of the Great Plains. We use everything from daikon radishes to native grasses to buckwheat, a diversity of different types of cover crops that as they grow up, we bring the cows in first to eat all of the plants. Again, mimicking these things. Whenever they sense that pressure, the roots grow deeper, they break up the soil, they exude the carbon, they create the porosity. Like all of these things begin to happen. The cows poop and stomp it in.
It's a whole ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a whole
Nature has
ecosystem.
its own thing of how,
absolutely.
Again, we kind of broke away from that, and now health is suffering, right?
Well, we've used pesticides to just destroy all of the living organisms in the top 12 inches of the thing are just decimated. And then we dump the fertilizers on them. Everything in the ground is all interconnected. And you dump all this nitrogen on it, and you confuse these guys. Well, normally this little guy, I'm calling them little guys, these little microbiome in the soil are like, I need nitrogen. And so what would normally happen is they would tell this little bacteria over here, and it would grow up a plant that would grow something that would give it nitrogen. And they talk, like the soil talks to itself.
Nature talks to itself.
For sure.
I really do.
For sure,
plants,
100%.
There's an energy, there's a frequency there.
Absolutely. And so when you throw all of these synthetic chemicals on there, it confuses it and destroys it. And so our role, as best we can, is to regenerate what would have happened in nature had man not intervened with all these synthetic things. And so to me, that's what regenerative farming is, hence the word regenerative. We're regenerating the soil.
I might mess this word up, but can you explain the agrihood
Sure. Yeah.
community?
We do not consider ourselves an agrihoods. I love agrihoods, and I have buddies that have developed agrihoods, and I think it's great because it's reintroducing people to agriculture. The challenge with an agrihood is oftentimes it's a very large master plan community with all of the things that we're used to seeing in master plan communities, St. Augustine grass annuals, all the stuff.
Oh, so this is the opposite of that.
And well, an agrihood is a master plan community.
Okay.
And they usually have a 2 to 3 to 4 acre farm on it. And it's usually more theater than it is the interconnectedness that you and I are chasing after. And so where you have predominantly development with a small piece of farm, the reason why we don't consider ourselves an agrihood is because we're primarily a farm with a very small piece of development integrated into it.
Which is how it should be.
Yeah, and look, we don't proselytize that everyone should do what we're doing here, but what we are trying to do is create the what if. We're trying to show people, what if you think more about introducing this concept, or what if you can harmonize with nature in a way like this? What if you can create a place where you can be completely autonomous with food security? And so we're asking ourselves these questions, and then as we do that, we hope that we're being a model for other people to then follow. And they may not do it at the extreme that we're doing it, but maybe it'll inspire them to do it in a way that's still going to move the needle for so many other people to live out a lifestyle that you and I enjoy so much.
How does permaculture design the influence, the layout, and the operations of the farm?
When I think about permaculture, the concept to me that originally inspired me, there's a book written by a guy named Ian McCarg. It was called Design with Nature. And it was really the birth of all the ideas that I utilize to this day. It's this concept that if your approach to design begins with honoring what's there before you get there, and then you do, through using science, study, and persistence, you do the right things, you can integrate development into an ecosystem without completely disrupting and destroying the ecosystem. Now, sometimes you're more successful than others, but when I think about permaculture, the whole concept, at least the way I understand it of permaculture, is designing in a way which you're honoring the ecosystem around you, and you're creating kind of the symbiosis of, you were talking about the resonation between the animals and the vegetables and the ground, and I believe all that's so true. And so I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to take that one step further and integrate us into that ecosystem in a way that doesn't disrupt it, but allows us to thrive with the animals and the plants and so we're actually inserting ourselves into the ecosystem without overwhelming the ecosystem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Your community point, the fourth one. So there was a study done on autoimmune diseases and why they're on such a rise in the United States. And it's because our lifestyle and culture is very much segregated from one another.
Yeah.
You get up, you go to work, you're with your coworkers in like an office space, you come home,
You're in a conditioned car into your garage. You're never being exposed.
Box to box to box to box
to box to box, exactly.
And your kids are eating food in front of the TV. You're eating on the go, or maybe you skipped because you had to put your other kid to sleep.
Right.
A very busy lifestyle. But where's your grandparents? Where's your aunts and uncles?
Yeah.
Where's your neighbors?
Yeah.
I don't know how it is for you, but like it's not normal where I live, even where I grew up, or even where I am now, for your door to be open and for your neighbors to be in and out, or for your family to be in and out. You have to call them first.
Right.
Don't show up unannounced.
Yeah.
You have to text first. You have to make plans. Oh, we have to make plans well in advance. We have kids now. We can't, you have to get on our schedule. There's no community.
Right.
And I've noticed that me personally, dealing with my own health issues over the years, when I'm around people enjoying a meal and I'm not thinking about the food.
Right.
Because I'm so engaged and having such a good time. And guess what? Those days I don't have any issues.
Yeah.
I have no digestive disruptions. There's something to that where I'm like, this study was onto something.
Well, and I love what you're saying, because that was kind of my point is I do love the science. I love to geek out. But sometimes we do overcomplicate it.
I agree.
And so I try to, especially with people that maybe aren't there yet, I really try to just stay real high level. And if you can do these simple things, it really isn't complicated. It's what our grandparents or great-grandparents were already doing. When you're young, you hear your grandparents say stuff. And I told you how much I love my grandfather, but still they're old-fashioned, everything. My grandma used to always tell me anytime I got hurt, go get in the ocean, go get in the salt water. And I used to think she was so silly. Another thing that I thought was so silly is my mom told me when she was a little girl that whenever they would get cut or whenever they had problems, my grandfather would take a strong incandescent light bulb and wrap a sheet around it and make it go to wherever their cuts were. And
that's the light therapy today.
Yeah. Yeah. But my point is that our grandparents, our great-grandparents, we're so much smarter than we give them credit for, and we're just now relearning what they already knew.
Yeah. It's nothing new. What year? This isn't new. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's not that complicated. It does the way you broke it down. It's actually pretty basic, and it worked. You
talked a little bit about kind of Jeff had a vision for this. Jeff, for those who are listening, is my now business partner and co-founder of the farm at Okefenokee. Jeff grew up on a very small village, and I think it was kind of like a Mennonite village, but it was in Iowa. It was Amana, Iowa. And so listening to Jeff talk about it, it was an idyllic village. They had a butcher and, a blacksmith. Like, it was old timey village. And so this is kind of going back to those parallel paths. So Jeff before he ever even picked up the phone to call me back in 2021, he was already, had this romantic desire to relive his childhood like so many of us have. And so when he called me, I had my own vision from another project that I had started back before the Great Recession about building around farms as well. And, I didn't share this with you, but I had read a book called Omnivore's Dilemma back in probably 11 or so. I can't remember when it was, but it changed my ideas around regenerative farming as well. And so he and I both kind of had our own perspectives on what we could do. But when I showed up to this place for the first time, and we began to ride around and begin to start talking about, well, we could do this. And, the energy off of him was feeding to me, and we could do this. I mean, it was clear that we had a very unique and special vision for what we wanted to accomplish. Because, many times when you have two people coming at it from different perspectives, there's going to be a tension there. And from day one, he and I were so like-minded. We felt so blessed to be in the relationship that we're in, because with his agricultural background and with my conservation-based development of integration of the building element into the agriculture, like, we were just uniquely equipped to do together what none of us could do by ourselves. And so that was really the birthplace of the idea of the farm. And then it just began to grow from there.
What year did you guys have your first conversation about this?
It would have been the summer of 2021, I believe.
Wow. Okay. They call this the healthiest place on earth.
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit? Just a little bit.
Well, we never want to miss an opportunity to be cute, right? And so Disney is the what do they call it? The happiest place on earth.
The happiest place on earth.
And Jeff thought it would be fun to do what they did, to take that and turn it a little bit for the healthiest place on earth. And we certainly haven't invented anything. We're just trying to reimagine what things would be like if we were living in the healthiest place on earth. All of the pillars that I shared with you that kind of guide our decisions, everything that we do is based on creating what we think can be the healthiest place on earth. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a bold statement. May not be true in its most pure sense, but it's a guiding desire that propels us and to move this place forward. And we're going to do everything that we can to live up to that moniker.
Let's go back to the very beginning.
Okay.
Where were you born and raised?
Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, nice.
Which is, we're here at the farm. So Jacksonville is, depending upon where you go. I was born on the north side, so it's probably 45 minutes to an hour from here.
Very nice. Okay.
So I grew up in this area. It's part of who I am. I love everything about it. I love the land. I love surfing. I love hunting. I love fishing. I love agriculture. I don't have a green thumb. I can't grow things very well. But for the last almost 20 years, I've been raising chickens in my backyard. And so even before Jeff and I got together for the farm, I've always pretty much lived off the land. Most of what I eat these days, I either forage here at the farm, I catch in the ocean or in the intercoastal, or I kill off the land. And so
your kids have been raised this way too?
Yes. Yeah, they love it.
Tell me a little bit about your childhood. Mom, dad, how it was growing up.
Yeah.
Did you know what you always wanted to do?
I didn't grow up with clarity around what I always wanted to do. My father's not a hippie, but he was a musician, and he's about that close to having been a hippie. And so his spirit is much more bohemian in nature, and I am my father, which, is good and bad, right? Like everything in life. But I tend to live very much in the moment. And so I don't spend a lot of time worrying. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the future. And that's changed obviously more since I had a family. But so when I was young, I never thought about the future. I was content just living in the day. Very much so.
That's awesome.
So yeah, my mother is a saint. She may be one of the sweetest, most gentle, most loving people you will have ever met. My father is funny, engaging, quirky, very quirky. Absolutely beautiful people. And so I was very fortunate to have them as parents. When I was growing up, I can remember all the kids always loved to come to our house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What took you on, schooling? Where'd you go for school? Did your parents have a say in that?
We moved around a little bit. So my father didn't go to college immediately. My parents had me when they were very young. My mom was, I think, 18, maybe 19. My father was as well. And so they were kids, they were kids with a kid. And so they didn't know what they wanted to do. So my father worked construction and then ultimately decided to go off to college. And so we stayed in Jacksonville and he moved to Tallahassee.
What takes you on your life path?
It was a little tumultuous.
Okay.
So my father, as a musician, as you might imagine from the 60s, was, and once you always are, a drug addict. And so our path was marked very much in the early years with ups and downs, with my father's, where he was in that cycle. And so for me, as the oldest, the one who, was to some extent carrying the burden along with my mother, I think that I don't blame my father and I don't blame the disease, but I think it certainly had an impact on who I would become and who I am today. I'm very much at peace with it all, but I think at the time, to your question, it was certainly the beginning of a path that I would go on. I think it manifested itself for me personally. It probably showed up in about 8th grade. I think that's when the wheels began to fall off.
So you remember being in 8th grade and maybe becoming aware that something is off in my family.
Well, I mean, yeah, I had already known something was a little bit off and different, but I think the first time, I can't remember exactly how old when I found out, but my guess is that would have been when I was in 6th or 7th grade. And so by 8th grade, I was experiencing emotions, I was experiencing pressure, I was experiencing things that I didn't really understand maybe, and I think it was trying to make its way out in certain ways. And so in 8th grade, I just remember that was a point of the beginning of the rebellion in my life. And because I'm my father's son, let me be completely honest, I'm rebellious by nature, right? Like, in other words, I do not like to be told what to do. I don't like rules. But I think it was at that point that I really started to act out. I had done very well in school up until that point in 8th grade. Well, evidenced by the fact I had to go to summer school, right? Like I started down the path of making failing grades. And unfortunately for me, at the time, I say unfortunate, I believe fortunately now, because I think to me, it's a redemptive story. But at the time, it progressively, the rebellion progressively got worse.
Do you remember what you were feeling at the time in 8th grade? Like, were you...
Anger.
Anger?
Oh, anger, yeah.
Is it because
betrayal?
Okay.
I can vividly remember. This is a silly story I'm going to tell you, but I can remember it like it was yesterday. I can remember I had some buddies and we were out in the woods. There were woods all over the place, and we had some beer. And this would have been, I think this would have been 8th grade. Maybe it was late 7th grade. We had some beer. And this is funny too. Imagine now if you were in the woods and you had some beer and the beer had been in the woods for days. And we're in Florida. And so it's 85, 90 degree beer.
No.
So we're drinking hot beer in the woods. And I remember in that moment thinking to myself, because I had learned a little bit about addiction and everything. And I remember in that moment thinking, should I be doing this? Because of I had learned in Al-Anon and some other things that families go to about the hereditary nature of addiction and everything. And I remember in that moment thinking, oh yeah, I should do this. If my father could do this to his family, then I can do it too. Mm-hmm. And so I can, you know what I mean? Like, that speaks to a spirit of not only rebellion, but anger and spitefulness, right? Like, so that's kind of, I think, where I was.
So because you were seeing him do it.
Yeah.
You're like, well, so can I.
Yeah.
But you also probably noticed and saw what it was putting your mom through.
Yeah, absolutely.
And feeling like you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure your brother plays a part too, like maybe shielding him, or maybe he was too
absolutely,
young.
and absolutely did very much so. In fact, he didn't learn for many years after that. We kept that from him. It was just my mom and me. So yeah, very much so.
So you start rebelling.
So that was 8th grade, and then so I would tell you, I'm going to tell 2 stories at one time. So I would tell you when I was younger. Probably in 5th grade, I had an experience in church. We were raised in church. I had an experience where it was a revival. I felt like the Holy Spirit, that Jesus was tugging at my heart. And I responded to that in a way at the time that I thought was accepting that call. And I do believe at that moment, for me, that was the beginning of faith in my life.
And I'm sorry, that was 5th grade, you said?
I think it was either 5th or 6th grade.
And you remember like knowing that much?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I remember where I was sitting in the church.
Okay.
I remember the very moment. I don't remember the exact age, but it was around that period of time. And the reason I tell you that is because that faith that was a mustard seed for me in the beginning, that was beginning to grow. In 8th grade, with that rebellious spirit, I began to close that off and to really build walls around that, because I had to, right? Like, if I was going to act out in this way, I had to control that. I had to calm it. I had to quiet it down. So the reason I mention that is because you've got these 2 competing forces going on, right? You've got this life-giving force that's inside of me, but then you've also got this spirit of rebellion that's pushing me to do more and more, to go from, into a path where, I woke up one day and didn't recognize really kind of where I was.
When you were in 8th grade and rebelling and the years to follow, were your parents not strict with you going to church, or they would try and you would rebel and not go?
No. I would still go.
Oh, you would still go? Okay.
But it would, to be fair, it was a confusing time. I mean, we were, in many ways, we were kind of playing the game of church, right? My parents were still young, remember? I mean, they were much younger than I even am now, way younger. Trying to figure out financially how to make things work for our family, dealing with the kind of collateral damage of the addiction as it relates to the family. And so they were distracted. All through high school, things just got kind of progressively worse. I spent as much time away from school, skipping school as I could and still kind of pass. Mm-hmm. So by the time I graduated, it was, my grades were just good enough to graduate.
High school.
And I had not even thought about going to college. And so at that point, I didn't know what I was going to do, or frankly, didn't really think about it, didn't care. My wife teases me. She's like, well, didn't you take the SAT or anything? I was like, I didn't even know they gave it. I didn't even know what an SAT is, right? Like I knew nothing. I was checked out. I did go to junior college, thinking that's what I should do. And I went like one time and just stopped going pretty much, and fished and surfed and did other things other than that. And after failing out of that first semester, my father came to me, and my mother was supportive of this, by the way, too. But he basically said, he goes, look, we're going to let you continue to live here if you get a job and start working. But if you continue doing what you're doing now, you need to leave the house. And so it was kind of a pivotal moment for me. And so I had worked. I started working when I was 15. So I've been a hard worker, a real job when I was 15, but way before that, cutting grass and working at nursery. So I've always worked hard.
What made you get those jobs though? Because I'm sure were your parents telling you to, or because you just, this is how I can...
I think my grandfather is a very strong figure in my life. Much of who I am, especially my work ethic, comes from my grandfather. And so in the early days when I was very young, I worked with him. He was a handyman. He worked at our church. He worked 3 jobs just to, put food on the table. And so I worked with him when I was growing up. And so anything that you see in me that's a great trait around like work ethic and stuff, and my father's a hard worker and my mother's an incredible worker too, but that was really, I think, what shaped the place in my heart that in those early days, I wanted to mimic what he was doing. So I failed out of junior college, and my father said, because I told you he was a carpenter, he still had his tool belt, and he handed me his tool belt, and he said, I want you to go jump in your truck and drive around to every construction site that you can find. And I remember, I can literally remember watching him tell me this and almost word for word what he said, which is kind of fun.
Were you angry?
No.
Okay.
No. And he said, I want you to tell them that you're an incredibly hard worker, but you don't have any experience. And so the very first construction site that I went to, they hired me.
Oh my God.
And that was the beginning of who I would ultimately become and why I'm here at the farm. I'm the developer and the builder here and everything, but that was the beginning. I was hired. You're too young to know this, but there was a show called Andy Griffith when I was growing up that I loved. And there was the young kid on there, his name was Opie. And so all the older guys on the construction crew that called me Opie. So for years, everybody called me Opie because at the time, I was 17 years old, and I was out there with those guys working construction. And so that lasted probably 2 years, but now this story kind of comes back together. This is the best part of the story, the most fun part of the story to me, because you've got this guy at this point in time with this rebellious spirit that's continuing, by the way. I'm partying on the weekends.
So you're still doing your
thing. Yeah. Okay. I'm still doing my thing. I'm working
and
I'm earning my keep in my house, but I'm still doing my thing, right? I was at that first job site, and I'll never forget it. I can remember every single thing about it. I was in this room. I was building out at what would be called the Human Resource Center. I was on the first floor. It was being sheetrocked, and I was putting in some stuff for one of the carpenters, and I could hear a guy who I knew on the other side of the wall. But since it was kind of sheetrock and not finished, you could hear every word. And he didn't know that I was there. And there were some day laborers there. I don't know if you know what day laborers are, but guys that didn't work on our crew, but they would pick up and they would come for the day. And many times they're, junkies of some sort, not to be ugly, but it's just true, right? So they don't hold jobs down because of drug use and everything else. And so they just work by the day. And so this guy was telling them about Jesus. And so remember this little faith seed that I told you about. So I'm sitting there on the other side in my rebellion, and I'm not in the beginning purposefully listening, but I'm hearing. I'm working away and I'm hearing him. and he's sharing the story about Jesus. And I knew the Bible growing up in church. Something happened, supernatural. While he was talking and sharing with those guys, that little mustard seed inside of me that had been taken captive was released. And it was like, there's a story in Acts, Paul, who is an apostle, is writing to this town, and Paul's persecuting, like he's killing these Christians, and Jesus shows up before him and he says, Paul, why do you persecute me? And his name was actually Saul at the time. They changed his name later. He fell off of his horse and he had like scales on his eyes. He couldn't see anything. And then later on, these scales came off of his eyes, and that was the experience I had. I mean, I didn't have scales on my eyes, but I had scales over this seed of faith inside of me. And the scales were removed, and that spirit of rebellion was removed from within me, and it changed everything about me.
Do you remember, can you take me back to that moment? Like what you were listening, but what were you feeling?
I was feeling all of the things that I knew that were true that I had been covering up, both about me, about my faith, about who I was. You have to remember, I was probably, 17-year-old Doug was probably demoralized, right? Like my life was not going in a good direction. I was headed down the same path my father had been on. And so in that moment, I experienced a freedom that there's no way to describe otherwise than just supernatural. My mother will tell you to this day that I left one way and I came home another, and I've never been the same.
Wow.
So I'm working construction. My life has changed. And, again, as a part of, my faith, in both historically and personally, a faith is something you live out and you're learning and you're growing in. We call it sanctification within the faith, but like I wasn't perfect. So I don't want to come across by any stretch of imagination saying that I was perfect, but I knew at that moment that God had a plan for my life, and I wanted to seek after him, and I wanted to begin to the best of my ability to get rid of the stuff that was dragging me down.
Well, when you go home that day, after hearing the workers talk about Jesus, you quit drinking? When your mom says he left one person, came back as another one.
I think the answer is yes, partially. I mean, it probably wasn't immediate. Like there was a period of time that I had to to work on these things, and God was working on both my heart and my physical, things that I struggled with. So it was supernatural in the way that it changed my heart. The way that it manifested itself in my actions took time. The process of sanctification is like the chiseling off of the things that weigh you down. And so I think what my mom would tell you is it wasn't because she wasn't seeing me drink, of course. I think she would tell you that it was more that she saw my spirit. She saw someone who was probably angry, rebellious, not grateful, unthankful, inwardly focused, narcissistic maybe, become someone who was completely changed by the power of Jesus and was now in a position, not a perfect, but someone who wanted to be different, who wanted to experience the fruit of the Spirit. They wanted to experience love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, understanding, all of these things. And so, again, it wasn't immediate, but it would be a pathway that I would begin a journey on. And so now you had these parallel paths that collided. You've got me as a different person. And so not only did my personal and my spiritual life change, but now you've got this empty shell of a guy who hadn't been studying in high school, who isn't very bright. I don't know all of these things, and I've got to now start working. And so I continue to work construction. At some point, the story takes another turn, but before I go down that way, I want to pause and make sure you don't have any more questions before I head there.
My only question is, when you had that moment back at the construction site that day, and you said now it's like it's a path that you're on now that's changing. It wasn't just immediate or whatever. Was there a little bit of a back and forth between now this new life and this new path that you are, chiseling away at and have made a conscious decision to go this way versus what you're still seeing at home maybe?
No, I think that God gave me the visibility to completely forgive my father. And so the anger that I was feeling before was removed.
Did you try to talk to him at all? Try to get him to follow you?
No, my father has had and continue to have his own faith. This was something that it was a demon that he was dealing with, but my father has his own beautiful faith. And his story is very different than mine. It's compelling in ways that probably mine's not. But it didn't change the way that I related to my father as it relates to his addiction, in as much only that it changed my heart. But it didn't cause me to want to change him. I knew that he was doing the best that he could do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
At this point, I'm just trying to live out my faith. I fail. I still have temptations. So I fail. I'm working through all of that, continuing to work. Another maybe year goes by. I changed job sites. And at this point, we had a really tough time. I was working in a hospital now, and there was going to be a big inspection. So we had worked, my crew that I was on had worked for 2, maybe 3 days straight without going home. And I was sleeping on the gang box, and I was worn out. It was horrible. One of the hardest periods of working I can ever remember, just trying to stay awake. And here's the moment. Let me set it up for you. I'll never forget it. At this point, I'm maybe 18, and you know what a gang box is? It's like a big job box. Imagine it's the size of a quarter of a pickup truck, and it's got a big flat thing on it. And so I'm laying across the top of it, dozing in and out on my break. And I look up, and this young guy comes walking through the hospital, and he has a set of plans rolled up on his shoulders, and he's walking back. He's got a hard hat on. His hard hat doesn't have any concrete on it, no scratches. He's got on a tweed jacket with patches on it, good looking guy. And I'm laying there, and I'm watching this guy walk by, just kind of watching. I turned over to one of the older guys. I'm like, who's that guy? And they're like, oh, he's the engineer. Well, to find out later in life, he probably wasn't the engineer. He's probably the architect. And for a lot of different reasons. Number one, engineers don't typically dress like that. Architects dress like that. But in my mind, he was the engineer. And so in that moment, I thought to myself, I can continue to work these 3-day shifts and kill myself, or I can be that guy. I want to be that guy. So I start going to school at night. And so I start going to community college, and it was tough. My little brother at this point was still in high school. And so he was teaching me what he was learning in high school so that I could pass my classes, and trying to build up, learning how to add and subtract fractions. Like, I literally didn't know anything. And so I worked my way through junior college and get accepted into engineering school at UCF.
I want to go back to that moment for a second where you saw this guy, architect / engineer. There's a common theme that I see in some guests when I get to speak with people, is that there's always this something small, maybe a bit superficial about it, or materialistic, that as kids we see, and it sparks something in us and puts us on our path. And obviously when you go down the road then, and the reason it brings up, because it's like funny, because they say like, oh, don't chase materialistic things, or don't do this. It's like, but it could be anything. And one of my previous guests said, you take that. This is like inspiration for any young kid watching this. Is like, no, take that and use it to motivate you to go do the thing that you want to do. Ultimately, that you're going to get over it, right? That shiny thing is not going to be so shiny anymore for you. Right? I'm sure you don't care about the hard hat and the tweed jacket anymore. And
I've always wanted a tweed jacket, though. I've always wanted a tweed jacket with patches. I still don't have one. I need to get one day.
You got to get one now. So it's like you find that thing. There's nothing wrong with seeing that as a child. As long as you, at some point, realize, okay, this is a materialistic thing. But I think it's a really big motivating factor for people. And it's a positive thing if you make it positive. Like it changed your life in this thing. Okay, so your brother's teaching you. He's
helping me learn how to do all the stuff. And it was going into engineering, there was a lot of math, obviously. One of the other things that was, I guess, as I'm thinking through like the poignant things for me, a moment I'll share with you that was just so important, maybe be helpful for some young people who are thinking that they can't do things, because remember, I mentioned before, I was demoralized. I was embarrassed that I didn't know these things.
When you're at engineering school.
Now this is before, this is still while I was at community college. I was going to share something with you, but I had gone from 8th grade all the way till I graduated, I had gone without making an A in any class ever. I was making maybe no B's. I mean, I was making C's and D's and just enough to graduate. And so I'll never forget, after being in junior college, my first engineering class that I had to kind of take was Calculus 1 with analytic geometry. It wasn't the business calc, it was the one with geometry. And I studied, you can't imagine how hard I studied. I've got a great work ethic from my grandfather. I mean, I would, even in engineering school, I would study 6 or 8 hours a day. I could study all day, but I studied so hard, and I made an A in Calculus 1. I was so proud. I'll never forget it. Never forget it. It was the first A I had made since I was a kid.
All you had to do was apply yourself.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And the focus and the discipline and, like you said, work ethic.
Anybody who wants to do it can do it. And it wasn't easy. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. It wasn't. I'll never forget. There was a kid I went to high school with that was really smart. He was tough to be around. He was very annoying. And when I went back to junior college, I went to him and I said, will you help me learn how to study? And he taught me what he did to study. But you have to, if you really want to succeed, I believe, you have to humble yourself and you have to work hard. That's what I did. I humbled myself. I learned from as many people as I could.
There's no shortcuts.
And there's no shortcuts.
As kids, I think there, even I thought so. You're like, oh, I can, there's shortcuts here or whatever. There isn't any.
No shortcuts. No. So that one A convinced me that I could do it. And so that A turned into more A's. And then, again, I'm not bragging, but from then on, I never wanted to make anything but an A. So I continued to make A's almost all the way through graduation.
For you to walk this new path, though, you had to cut off friends.
I had to sever all my relationships.
Okay.
Because, no one's strong enough to try to quit all of that and live two lives. Like you can't.
No.
For me, I had to, in the addiction world, it's called new faces, new places. And so if you're trying to quit something, you have to find new faces and you have to find new places. And so that's what I had to do.
You were okay with your dad going through his sting still while you were on this new path.
Yeah.
That's still, that was not preventing you or making you feel any sort of way still.
No. I'm trying to be as like in the moment as honest as I can as I'm thinking about it, but it was, I don't connect the two things.
It's a good thing because I feel as though if there's kids watching, that you could see just because someone in your household is going through something and you were on that path at one point, it doesn't mean that you have to continue on if you don't. You know what I mean? Like that excuse is not valid anymore. It's up to you to change. It's up to you to want to move forward regardless of what you're seeing. I think sometimes
I very much believe that.
People use it as a crutch sometimes.
I try not to judge other people, but what I've tried to teach my kids is, you have a decision to make in pretty much anything that happens in life. Because there are good things that happen and there will be bad things that happen. There will be struggle, there will be heartache and everything else. And everything that happens to you is either going to inform how you move forward in a good or in a bad way. And so here's what I mean by that. I had the opportunity with my father's addiction to decide that I could continue down the path and that could inform who I would become, or I could decide I did not want to be like that. I mean, you can use that illustration with pretty much anything, but we all struggle. And you just have to decide if you're going to allow that thing to help reinforce that that's not what you want, so it drives you harder away from it, or you succumb to that and use that as an excuse, and then you dwell around that thing and it becomes part of your life. Even if you don't necessarily become it, it becomes part of your story because you won't release it and let go of it.
The premise of the show is life is what you make of it. And I think after a certain point, as kids, you can get away with that excuse of, but I had this trauma, or I had this child, or I had this upbringing, or whatever it is that happened. Yeah. But you nailed it on the head with we all have troubles. We all go through things. And then the second is you make that decision after a certain age, a certain point. I think it's up to you as a person to make that change, to make that conscious decision, to take action. And we're all on different paths.
Yeah.
But I choose not to be on that path anymore.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So you cut off some friends.
So I got a degree in engineering and I went out for a couple of years and did engineering. Okay. After I left my first job, I went with a planning and engineering firm, but I never enjoyed being behind the computer and doing the design and stuff. I always enjoyed working in the field and working with clients and building businesses and doing kind of I don't know, the side of the business that a lot of typical engineers don't like doing, right? Like you think about a typical engineer, they're often introverts and they're often love to design, and that's not all of them, of course, but it happens to be true. And so I always gravitated toward those side of the business, which served me well because a lot of my partners and other people didn't want to do that. So yeah, I never really did the true engineering side of it. And so I built a business. I went into the business after my first company, became a partner and owner in that company, and then built a business line around construction and development. And so that would have been really in 01. So right at the turn of the century. And so I was there for 7 years building that business. As I built that business, I continued to refine my understanding, my knowledge base, my contacts, my experiences around literally everything about construction and development.
Okay.
And so another pivotal moment, one of the things that I had a real desire to do, because I grew up, as I shared with you, being outside in the forest and the waters, being a part of nature has always been a very big part of my life. And so one may hear all of this and go, all they can see is the division that you normally think about when you think about construction and development and nature, right? Like we have all been deluded into the fact that you have to be in one camp or the other. But the reality of it is the two can coexist together. We'll talk more about permaculture, but the whole idea is that combining, construction development with nature in a symbiotic way. And so that was always kind of my passion and my love. And so one of my largest clients that I did work for was a renowned developer, historical in the Southeast. And so he convinced me to leave that company to come to work for him and take over his development company. And so I was there for 17 years doing that.
And this was in where was this?
This was in North Florida and South Georgia. So we had projects all the way from Palm Coast to Savannah, Georgia.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming this is where you found your niche. Like, this is what I like
this
to
is
do.
It.
This
Well,
is
I
what I'm
learned
good
from
at.
him. I told him, I said, I'll leave, but only if I can learn from you. He was so passionate about the integration of keeping the native landform. He got in a fist fight with a bulldozer operator that knocked down a tree that wasn't supposed to be knocked down.
Good for him, though.
So I had a tutelage underneath him. And so, along with my other studies, that really informed what we do here at the farm and what would mark my career in development. I call myself, again, I don't want to sound arrogant. I don't even know if this is a real thing, but I call myself a conservation-based developer because I don't see other people doing it the way that I like to do it, the way that I'm trying to do it, the way I subscribe to want to do it. Like my passion is the integration of development and nature in a way, as I said before, that they can coexist.
Can you say that again for me? Conservation?
I call myself a conservation-based developer. You could probably come up with a better way to say it.
No, I like it.
But,
I like it. I like it a lot.
And so, that kind of brings us up to date. And so I had met Jeff back in 02, I think, or 03.
Okay.
And so I was still a consultant at the time, and I had a big project that I was working on with the developer that I would ultimately go with. And we were doing a big project and needed a lot of oak trees. And Jeff's background is agriculture. He had a huge tree company. And so Jeff came out to plant all of the trees on one of our projects. And so we hit it off. We both loved all the same things and had an affinity for the same things and developed a friendship. But he and I separated from 02 until, what would it have been, 2021. So for almost 20 years, we took different paths. Jeff moved out west. He put together one of the largest wind farms ever. He put together all kinds of different businesses, agriculture, sustainable energies. And I stayed here in this area developing. And
so over those 20 years, you're still in this conservation-based mentality, getting better. He's in the agriculture with the wind farms and whatnot. Okay.
Correct.
How many log cabins are here right now that are built?
Well, we are in our infancy. So we just started selling about a year and a half ago. I think 7 that are 100% complete. And we've probably got about 7 more under construction right now. So, within the next, I would say 4 months, we'll probably have 14 cabins. And then during that time, we'll probably have started somewhere between 12 to 20 more. So if you think about a locomotive kind of getting started going, that's what we're doing right now. We're going faster and faster and faster. We have, the first phase was a total of 24 home sites, over 100 acres, just to give you an idea of how small the development is in the scale of all the agriculture. All of those home sites have been sold. And so now not all the cabins are in place because some of the owners are still designing their cabins. Some of them are being permitted right now. And so we're in the process of getting them all built. But the first area is sold out. And actually where we're located right now in what we call the orchard, the olive orchard, we have 25 home sites. And if everything goes well, Lord willing, we think we'll sell these all out before the end of the year.
Is there a number as to how many you'll allow?
Yes, we have plans to only do 250 over 1,000 acres.
And how do you ensure that even the cabins and the way they're built and the whole system around that harmonizes and flows with the authenticity that you have going on with the farm?
I love that. I love the question. I could put you to sleep by all the answers. I'm going to choose one,
okay, and
then you can ask more if you want.
Okay.
When we finish our homes or our cabins, we allow the areas around the cabins. I'm going to define this by defining the opposite of it. In Miami, my guess is around your home you have St. Augustine grass and annuals, and it's probably manicured beautifully, and can't imagine the amount of weed and feed that needs to go on it in order to make it look like that then goes into the oceans and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, that's what we call normal. What we do, there's no grass out here. We use cover crops and native grasses to come back into the yards of where the cabins are so that everything goes back to nature. So you have a thriving ecosystem literally outside your door. So you've got butterflies and birds. You've got everything literally all around you, and that's your yard. And now the whole purpose of being on the farm is not to have your own yard necessarily. It's to be integrated into the farm. But that's just one way that we make sure that our development doesn't overwhelm the area. It goes back to this idea of simplicity, of stripping off all of the things that are such distractions to us. And, it's in fact, Jenny and I have had this conversation before. It's meditative.
100%.
When you're working in the garden, it's meditative. There's no other better way to probably describe it. And so
nature has a way to pull you in.
Yeah.
You're not gardening and thinking about something else. You're not feeding animals and thinking about something else.
Yeah.
It's actually active meditation.
Yeah.
Which goes to show you the way humans are meant to be living and supposed to be living.
Right.
It also had the anecdote to anxiety and depression somewhere along the way.
Yeah. Well, think about, you hear about, and again, I don't want to spout off a bunch of stuff and sound like a prude or anything, but, with social media and with phones and stuff, we've all reprogrammed our minds to be dopamine addicts, right? In other words, it's so hard to sit still and to be quiet, to watch the sun without, in other words, it's a discipline. And whenever you're out doing these things that we're talking about, you're not even tempted to be on your phone. You're actually doing, as you said, what we were created to do. This is normal. This is not normal.
It's almost like a coming home.
Yeah.
Almost like, I don't know. It's nature. It's actually very, it's in our nature to be doing these things.
Yeah. When people visit, we are in South Georgia. Well, you guys are in Miami, so you know about heat, right? But people will say, well, does it get hot out here? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, of course it gets hot. But, and sometimes they'll say, well, do you have bugs? Now, to be fair, we should have way more bugs than we do here, but I think the swamp keeps them all over there. But I tell people, we've become so soft and comfortably numb that we strive to be pacified in our minds and in our bodies. We want to be comfortable all the time.
And we'll resist everything.
Mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, we're looking for this numbness. And guess what? Life shouldn't be numb. Life should be uncomfortable, joyous, hard, easy. Sunrise, sunset. Life should have a rhythm about it that most people don't get to enjoy because they're on this comfortably numb pathway. And so to your point, being out here kind of shakes you and it gives you the opportunity to feel the rhythms of life.
Yeah, I agree with you. Are there any programs or workshops on site that people
Not yet, but we're
partake in?
introducing something that I'm really excited about. In the fall, we're going to have something. I don't know that we have the right name yet.
Okay.
We're calling it the Farm Experience right now. I like the idea of the word immersion, though, better, but I don't know that we'll call it that. But imagine we want to have it to start it in a way that people can come, stay for the weekend, and just experience these things that we're talking about. It will be a curated experience where you show up on a Thursday, have dinner, and then we walk you through a lot of these things that we're talking about now, and it'll go through a Sunday. And so it'll be an opportunity for people to come out and experience it firsthand.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Count
I'm
me
really
in.
excited about that.
Count me in on that.
Yeah.
What challenges have you faced in developing this community where you wanted to prioritize both growth and environmental stewardship? Because this is not easy. I don't see this being easy.
Yeah. I think the first thing that would come to mind, and I hope this is a good answer, would be, since there's not really anything like this out there, we wanted to make sure and do it in a way that, despite the fact that Jeff and I are not here, whether something happened to one of us or whatever else, that this place could live on in perpetuity without us. And so I think the hardest thing was setting up a plan and then the appropriate governing documents that would establish the non-negotiables that make the farm special.
Wow.
I enjoyed that process so little I could vomit. It was horrible working through the legal documentations and all the documents. It was horrible. I dreaded it every single day. But it was necessary to go through, because without those things, you can't do something like this and then somebody come in who wants to change something and change it. If you do something like this, you really need to create the consistency, the expectations, and then the path to realize it. Yeah. And so I think that was the hardest thing to do.
But that's beautiful that you guys thought of that so early on, Well,
it's such an important part of it, because, I genuinely love the people that have trusted us with the investment and with their lives to move out here. And we want to not ever let them down. We want this place to be what they thought it was going to be. And we want it to, again, if something were to happen to me or to Jeff or whatever else, we want that continuity to remain intact.
Yeah. How does the farm manage the water, energy resources around here?
So let's start with water. You've probably read over the years, whether it was Lake Lanier up here in Atlanta, or whether it was in Las Vegas, like these water wars that are beginning to happen because it's a precious resource. One of the things that we wanted to do here, because we wanted this community to have a sovereignty about it that existed autonomous from everything else, not because we wanted to be recluse, but we wanted to make sure that the people that had places here felt comfortable and had security. In the case of another COVID, if we have issues with logistics chains or anything else, they know where their food's coming from. So these are important things to us. And so water was one of the things we wanted to shore up to make sure that we weren't relying on a local government to supply us water, or if they shut it off or whatever else. So we petitioned the state of Georgia to own our own water utility company here, which means that we were able to drill into the ground and we have our own withdrawal permit. So we own our own wells out here and our own community water system that's used for all the cabins. We don't use that for the irrigation for the plants and everything else. We have a separate system that's shallow for that. And we try to use as little water as we have to on those. So like even the olive orchard that we're in right now, it's not even irrigated. We just rely on the rain for that. The power, a lot of people ask us about the power, and we have the ability to be fully off grid. But from a efficiency standpoint, we've teamed with a local co-op to help them build a neighborhood solar program. So we're attached to that neighborhood solar program, because being able to team with other people to get the power is so much cheaper, is so much more reliable than trying to do all of that yourself. So we are on the grid from that perspective. But if an individual decided that they didn't want to do that, we have complete autonomy by propane and generators that you can run your house as well. So you have the choices to move back and forth with those depending upon how you want to operate.
What do people choose right now?
The grid, because it's the reliability, the cost, and it's the efficiency of it. And so our power, when the sun's shining, is coming from solar, but it's coming through a collected neighborhood program. But if a hurricane comes through, if a calamity were to happen, if we were to lose power from the grid, boom, we run all the power on the site through propane and generators. Separate.
What are your aspirations for the farm's future? What does the vision look like?
I want the people that have trusted us to build the farm to feel like we invested their trust in a way that brought a quality of life to them that is unsurpassed. I know that's a little frou-frou maybe, but I can't underemphasize our commitment to the people that would trust us to be neighbors and friends out here. So more than anything, we want to continue to do what we're doing, but do it in a way that brings joy to their lives. And we want to see people's lives change by being a part of what we're doing.
And I'm assuming a part of this answer is also, you're trying to say is, as you get bigger, you don't want to go the commercial way. You want to maintain
for sure
all the pillars of it as you're growing and as you're expanding. And because that happens, right? When you grow and expand, sometimes, but you're trying to keep that intact for everyone.
Well, I genuinely believe, 250 isn't that many. Mm-hmm. There is so much opportunity out here to not just grow the developed side of it, but talking, as you think about opportunities for people, whether it's working with people through trauma, coming out here doing horse work, or as you begin to allow your mind to wonder, there's a lifetime of mission that is born out of what we're doing here. And so our job is to put our owners in a place where they can thrive, and then help them live out their lives and their mission, and then bring others around us to experience the joy that we're having as well. And so I think I'm going to stay busy for the rest of my life doing that, and I know Jeff is. And so we're just highly focused on this. We have no desire to expand or franchise or anything else.
How do you see the farm and what you're doing here influencing a broader movement when it comes to regenerative culture and the community that you're building here?
Well, I can share with you that we are already having at least a small impact with young people. I have had more conversations that I can now count on my hands and feet with young people who've been inspired with what we're doing. That looks differently for them. Some of them maybe not as young, but folks that are trying to reproduce at different levels. I had a young lady in somewhere in Colorado outside of Denver who was just overwhelmed with what we were doing and was trying to kind of reproduce it on a smaller scale. I had another guy, forget where he was at. He was much further along, and I was helping him think through the business plan, because remember, it's one thing to want to do something like this, but you also have to have a financial model behind it as well.
I bet.
And so I get excited to think about young people imagining what we're doing here, and then they can take it in directions that we haven't even really thought about yet, both from a funding standpoint, but then also from an execution standpoint. And so I would hope that what we're doing inspires a new generation of not just developers or not just farmers, but folks in technology. We haven't even figured out yet exactly how technology can enhance what we're doing. Mm-hmm. I just get excited about this being a birthplace, a nursery of ideas and excitement that really changes people's lives.
This takes me to the next question. So you do believe that this model is replicable?
It depends on who you're talking with. I'm sure there could be critics that would do the math and say, well, one family per a gross 4 acres, but I really do. And whether it looks like this or it takes on a different complexion, I believe, this shared idea that probably you, I, and your husband, Brian, would have, I think we're moving to a more decentralized way of life. When I think about what we're doing and its ability to be replicated, I have this picture of decentralized farms. 75 years ago, you had family farms that supplied food to the areas around them. They grew a diversity of fruits and vegetables, and it was a decentralized system. And it worked because they were relying on their decentralized network to get food out to people. And it was both efficient, it was priced according to the value. I'm not going to say it was cheap, but it was priced according to the value, and the value was placed on the fresh vegetables and stuff. And so you had a model that was decentralized. What we've moved to in the industrial age is a centralized model, just like we've centralized everything, to where you now have the industrial food chain, that you have brokers that are buying food from all over the world and shipping it around. And the small farmers who would want to grow things don't have the ability to then send it. Now, farmers markets are helping with that, but I know this is a long answer to your question, but I believe that what we're doing in some ways is like a family farm. And I think that we're moving to a decentralized system more and more and more, where things like this can work. But what I get excited about is, I don't want to geek out too much with you, but when you do that, when you're in a decentralized system like that, now you're eating your regional vegetables that are harmonizing with your body because they've been grown locally. Yeah. You're in relationship with the people that are growing your food. Like we're I'm not advocating that we go back in time, but we're realizing all the beauty that we thought we outsmarted our great-great-grandparents from. We're reintroducing some of that beauty back into our lives.
Yeah, what you just touched on too, it's such a small thing, but it's such an important thing. Like, the people growing your food. Yeah. The energy going into it. My mom always said, don't make dinner or don't make lunch for yourself if you're in a bad mood. It's gonna harm you. Yeah. It's all about, your rhythm and your flow with what you're doing. And when you're in a community like this, and your neighbors are growing, or like the people that work at the farm, which I've met almost everybody at this point.
They're beautiful.
They're such beautiful people.
It's incredible. Incredible.
I mean, I can't even say enough nice things about them. Yeah. They're just amazing people that you have here, really. Reflecting on your journey, what legacy do you hope to leave through the farm?
I'll start with the easier one, I guess. The farm legacy would just be that we will have been the inspiration. Maybe not singularly, again, that sounds so arrogant, but I would hope that we will have been an inspiration to many people that would replicate in some form what we're doing, that would change the way that we think about how we can live in harmony with nature and development. From a personal perspective, my personal goal would be that I would be someone that my children can be proud of. Probably nothing more.
I think you are.
Yeah. I think I am too. And I don't say that from a place of arrogance because they tell me all the time. But a journey of life is a journey, and we have lots of opportunities to wreck that. I want to be consistent in the way that I love my wife and the way that I love my children, the way that I live out my faith, the way that I love on people. I would want to end well to where I didn't wreck that.
That's beautiful. Before you go, where can people find you?
The easy one, www.okefarm.com. www.okefarm.com.
I always try to spell it out.
Yeah. It's just
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
okefarm.com. That would be the easiest. Then we have an Instagram account, and if you just type in the farm at Okefenokee all kind of together, you'll find that. Yeah. I have an Instagram account. I don't post to it all the time. I try to give people a flavor of what it's like to live out here. That's Doug Davis Jr., I think with underscores between them. And then we also have an X account that's called, I think it's called Farm Okefenokee or Okefenokee Farm, but you'll find it when you look. So you can find us on kind of those areas.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah, this was amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you.